Welcome to Know Happiness, a podcast around how we seek, find, and sustain happiness in some of the most unusual places. I'm joined with Caleb Rogers, peak performance coach, mentor, or mental sensei, you're also well known as, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me back. It's great. Like I was telling you offset, you guys have done incredible. I love what you're producing.
Yeah, well, appreciate that because it has been a journey, to say the least. Well, one thing I ask all of our guests when they come is, what does happiness mean to you?
Yeah, I saw that. I thought that was a great question, and I'm going to kind of change it a little bit. I think there is happiness, and I think there is peace. And for me, like, happiness is like, you buy me a new car, I'm going to be stoked. I'm going to be really happy, excited to get that car, which is a general enthusiasm and a bubbly energy within inside. Peace for me, though, is that transcends circumstances. The Bible says, you can have peace beyond understanding. So even in my suffering, I can have peace. And that to me is alignment. I'm living on mission and authentic to who I am. So, when I think about happiness or I think about peace, I think that's showing up to my true potential.
I love that because it kind of does sound like or feel like happiness can be fleeting, right?
Absolutely.
And having peace is a totally different situation because, like you said, peace in the calm in the storm, so to speak, right?
Absolutely. Yep, you got it. For me, everybody else is maybe a little bit different, and maybe it's just a nomenclature or terms. But for me, I like to differentiate the two because, like you said, happiness is fleeting, and while I love that emotion, I look at it as like a spectrum of emotions, and even some of the dark ones are to be appreciated. And in that time, I think they all have their role. They all are just energy that we can use to fulfill, again, our purpose and our identity.
You're just such an interesting guy.
Thanks.
One thing, and I'm going to totally go off.
Stop.
Let's just riff here for a bit. I would love to know how you came to the place that you are today, because you seem like a really solid, dedicated, focused guy, but I can tell that you've done a lot of inner work.
Sure.
You want to, let's back up, let's go back years and years ago and kind of what led you to come to this place? Because I know you were a accountant.
Yeah, I'm a CPA. I don't keep my license active anymore.
Yeah.
But, I did the consulting, mergers and acquisitions for a while. I did acting for a little while. But I've always had kind of two sides, right? A very business side and a very creative side. And it wasn't until 2015 when I stepped into mental coaching that I felt like I could really merge those two together. In terms of the inner work that I've done or kind of how I've got here, I've got this expression I say, champions use pain to power their purpose. And I think a lot of people want to avoid being uncomfortable or want to avoid suffering. And the reality is I think it's through the desert periods of life that one grows the most. And for me, I think if I do seem that way, and I'm glad that, maybe I'm presenting that way, but the reality is it's like, man, I got my own work and stuff going on all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, if anything, it comes from making mistakes and comes from inner turmoil and comes from having to sort things out and obviously helping a lot of people doing it. That kind of grounds me in the reality. So I guess in summation, kind of welcome sometimes your pain or your adversity as you're going through it. Like that doesn't always have to be a thing that you try to avoid. It can actually be a thing that refines who you are and what you're supposed to do.
Well, I can really identify with that because it's certainly these struggles that I have overcome and experienced in my life is kind of what has led me to where I am, to where I want to go and share with others the tools, the things that have really helped me stay peaceful, and so I can really relate to that notion that.
Well, I think there's a biblical verse that says something that like God will send fires to test the heart. There is a refinement process while we're here, right? Like not everything will stick. Some things have to be kind of burned away. And you'll see that in like relationships too. Like, hey, you start, maybe you're married with somebody or in a deeper relationship. Well, what happens when that relationship gets tested? When you start to peel back the layers of your partner and they start to peel back the layers of you and get into the ugly, we get into the adversity of making it work economically or relationally or sexually or emotionally, like all of these things. And then like, it's like, okay, well now I know kind of the real person. Like, am I still going to commit? Your character, is it still going to show through in this relationship? And so it works on the individual and the relational level. So
yeah.
It's necessary.
Well, marriages, I think children and intimate partners are like the two relationships that will really trigger the shit out of you.
Yeah.
You know, like those are the mirrors, the
Right.
big mirrors that are like, if you can overcome and really work through those, man, that's like you're moving up in ascension of like, you know, you're
100%. Yeah. We were talking, my kiddo's 2 years old, and yeah, it's the most amazing, but also hardest thing. He's a little
Right.
mirror of like, oh dear, I'm doing that. Like,
Right.
I gotta
just
clean my
wait.
act up a bit.
Just wait till
Yeah.
teenage years.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm stoked.
Well, and it is a really, like being a parent is one of the greatest joys, as you know. But man, some days, like, you know, I have teenagers. So
Right.
it's like
You 15 and
15. We have a 17-year-old at home. I, of course, have a 22-year-old.
Oh, wow.
We're
Yeah.
grandparents now.
Oh, nice.
So we've got, you know, we're all over the board with, you know, children in different phases of their lives. But it has been, I think, probably a trip down memory lane for me a little bit. And like, wow, I did this to my parents.
yeah,
know?
that's so true.
And they're not even half as bad as I was, you know, but...
All right.
Well, let's get around and talk about peak performance, because you run a business, the Mental Sensei. Is that correct? Like,
Yeah, I do business as the Mental Sensei. Technically, it's Conquer LLC.
Okay.
We're there to conquer, but absolutely. So I started doing mental performance coaching for athletes in the UFC, the NFL. Then that kind of moved over to executive and group coaching, and from that, some keynotes and public speaking events. But I've been in the peak performance since, you know, about 2015, consulting before that, CPA work, advisory, that kind of thing.
So now when you say peak performance, explain that to our audience. What does that mean, and how does that relate to then what you do with your clients?
Absolutely. So I think the reality is that, like, everybody's going to face trials, right? And everybody, whether they want to admit it or not, has emotions. So when you show up on a daily basis, one, you want to be focused, but two, you want to stay consistently moving towards that goal or that focus. And three, and perhaps most importantly, you want to be in the right state. And people aren't intentional about creating or managing their state. Your state being, you know, your physiology and your psychology, right? What thoughts am I feeding, and how am I carrying or presenting or holding my body in space? And when you can do these things through adversity, through goals, through training over a long period of time, it typically yields great results. So peak performance, I think, from a kind of more definition textbook way is kind of your state of mind as you are operating towards a goal. From a spiritual standpoint, I think peak performance comes again when we were talking about from alignment, right? Being in alignment with what's inside, who you are, and the mission that you're here to do. So I kind of work all of that with my clients.
Well, how is that different, or maybe it's not, from like a flow state? You know, you hear about these athletes and it's like the Super Bowl and they have like the perfect game, you know, and they are in the zone. Is that somewhat relatable to peak performance?
Yeah, 100%. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi wrote a book called Flow, right? And he talks about flow state, you know, quite a bit exclusively. Stephen Kotler wrote The Rise of Superman, you know, which kind of goes into flow state as well, where it talks about some of the requirements for flow. The way I've best heard it described is flow state is almost like it's something that is coming through you, right? Time seems to slow down. Awareness and perception are heightened. You have very clear goals. And it's almost like if you were to become observant of it, you would knock yourself out of it. And while I think flow is awesome, we hope to achieve that with our athletes, sometimes flow is one of those things that you always can't just force flow. Sometimes we can create the right, I talk about it, well, that's kind of an inappropriate way to maybe explain it, but
Go for it. We're all about inappropriateness.
All right, well, I talk about kind of like maybe getting laid, right?
Okay.
Like, you know, you could go like on a date with somebody, you could shower, you could clean your house, clean your bathroom, get your hair cut, all of these things. And at the end of that date, you know, it might be like, well, hey, I had a great time, I got to go home. Well, you can't force yourself on that person, right? We wouldn't want that, right? That'd be bad. Flow state's kind of the same way. You can set the right things. You know, we can have a challenge that meets or slightly exceeds our perceived skill set or ability. We can be in a novel or new environment. We can have a strong sense of purpose. We can balance our kill versus our fun in our mentality. We can, essentially have a meaning of this thing, right? And all of these things could be aligned to create a sense of flow. But at the end of the day, you might just be off. Maybe you had a really bad weight cut. Maybe you're coming in sick or whatever. And you're like, well, I can't do it. And then, that's where I'll kind of switch theories to go towards more of like, well, how do we get peak performance with what's going on with you right now, right? So flow would be awesome if we can get there, but sometimes it doesn't always come. So we got to figure out through our pre-performance rituals and routines, our mindset, our attitude, how do we create the best of what is? And there's some great theories on that. Acceptance and commitment therapy is kind of based on that, where you accept the reality of what is and you commit to be your best in that reality. And again, a lot of that comes through intentional mindset and physical training routines.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like peak performance is trainable, coachable, whereas flow is something that's just kind of a God-given state that you are lucky if you can get into.
No, I think they're both trainable.
Okay.
I think they're both trainable. It's just, I think you are able to achieve peak performance a little bit easier than you're able to get into flow. Flow, you think about when you meditate, right? You're big into mindfulness activities or things like that. When you can get into that state of absolute presence where you are like digging, maybe painting or something, and you just lose yourself into that thing, that's awesome. And again, we'd love to do that. And I personally believe that the more that you do some of the exercises I encourage my clients to do, or the more that you train that, the more likely and replicable it becomes to get into flow state.
Okay.
Same thing with peak performance. It's training rituals and routines to do that. So, if you're before competition or before this podcast or giving a speech, if you go through a routine, you get warmed up, you do your stretching, maybe you do your vocal work, maybe you got some positive affirmations that you yell out in front of the mirror, whatever those things are, like we get in the right state and then it's like, okay, I'm good to go with what's going on. So I think both are trainable.
Okay. Well, very interesting. So with your clients that you work with, what do you see as some of the main roadblocks or obstacles that they come up against?
Perhaps the biggest, and I think this exists in society in general, is the incredible amount of pressure the individual puts on themselves to perform. And oftentimes it's motivated from a place of insecurity. Even athletes, I've worked with Super Bowl champions, I've worked with UFC fighters, I've worked with a wide variety of people. And I've also experienced this myself, where this is kind of the phase that I'm in right now. There is like this need to prove our value in the world. And potentially that comes from, the titles that you win, that comes from the money that you make, the partner that you obtain, the car that you drive, the clothes you wear, whatever it is, it's this external seeking of validation. And oftentimes we are left to confront that voice inside of ourselves that sees us as we are, right? All of our imperfections, all of our mistakes. And, I call it like the accuser. The accuser will kind of like come at you with all the things you're doing wrong, why you're a failure, why you're not good enough, why you're not worthy, all of these things, and just hold a magnifying glass to yourself. And there's a concept known as secondary gains, where sometimes we will do this almost intentionally as a repeatable pattern, because what does that do? That makes us go work harder, right? It's like, well, I better get to work, or I got to lose the weight, or I got to go make more money. And so we go to work and then we get the results, and then we continue that pattern. We start telling ourselves just how worthless we are, how horrible. So one of the biggest mental blocks I think I see with people is their motivation for why they're doing things, which a desperate motivation can carry you to the top levels of the sport, or business or competition. I mean, it works. I'm not saying it doesn't work. If you want to go with it, it works, but it doesn't yield a lot of peace.
Now, I was going to say, how do you feel along the way?
Right. And I want both. Like I want the results, but I also want peace of mind in getting the results. And so I think there's a way that we can operate out of a place of inspiration rather than desperation, an acknowledgement of our value, for me, rooted in Christ or God, of a supreme love, maybe for somebody else who isn't as religious, an ideal or purpose that they hold, that they can anchor there. And then it's like, okay, now I'm moving out of this energy rather than a need to prove or do whatever. And then the focus in a weird way doesn't become so much about ourselves. It becomes about the mission or the others or our purpose, what we're doing.
Yeah, I think, okay, so that's what you're seeing, the vast majority of your clients or people that you work with come up against? Is this like kind of unworthiness or trying to validate and prove who they are and why they're
Well, I think
success?
that's kind of the underlying deep thing, but it manifests in terms of really negative self-talk, incredible pressure that they put on, slow starts, or not being able to win big moments, because again, they will put the competition on a pedestal. It's like, well, if I win, I'm a winner.
Right.
If I lose, then I'm a loser. Nobody cares, whatever. And quite frankly, a lot of society does treat people like that, right? We treat people, but I'm advocating for a way of like, well, hey, let's first move internally of how we're treating ourselves. Then we can start to move externally in what we're doing and focus with clarity on our sport or our business or our process for getting the results we want.
Well, and that sounds amazing because I think of so many times people reach this like pinnacle of success. They're at the top of the mountain and yet they're still unfulfilled. They're still unhappy. They're still like, well, then what's the next thing? Like, okay, I win the Super Bowl. Now I have to win the next one.
Right.
One's not enough, and so like, how do you get that peace and like still have purpose and be working towards a goal, but maintain?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I think it comes back from alignment. When you look within and you're like, okay, I'm being authentically me. I am living to my calling or my purpose. Now, how can I do this the biggest, boldest way? That's great. And just to be clear, I'm not like minimizing the potential quest for greatness. I think that's awesome. That's who I love to work with, is people who want to do these things, because I think they can have incredible impact in what they do. I also think it's really great to have goals that you set and you move towards. Where I get is like, hey, are the goals of tomorrow stealing the joy of today? Right? Are you living from a place of authenticity? Are you living from a place of peace and still showing up powerfully in that energy? And if you are, great, then we'll go conquer the world. The name of my company is Conquer, right? But we're going to do it out of a strength or power that is rooted in authenticity and consistency.
Clearly I needed to hear this today, but I have been, I'm going to speak personally with this whole show and, getting the followers on TikTok and Instagram. And it became, that was my primary focus because I couldn't release the docuseries we made until we had the followers. And it was like I was just chasing, people, bodies, numbers. And I was absolutely miserable. I didn't enjoy anything that we were doing. And it was like every time I would film any content, it was just sitting and watching, how many views it got.
Right.
And I finally took a break, like a month and a half, 2-month break, and was like, okay, let's get refocused. And at this point now, it is so much more enjoyable. I don't pay attention to that. And it takes me back to that conversation you and I had several years ago, I think it's been now, where you said it's so much more about the message and not the messenger, like taking me out of it, because I do believe that this is a purpose from God. And it's made things so much more enjoyable.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I've swung a little too far to the other side because I'm not even watching them before they go out.
Right, yeah.
I'm just
It's
so
good.
relaxed.
Send it.
Yeah. No need to proofread, no need to
Right.
watch, So I'm trying to find a healthy balance of like, what can I do to improve?
Sure.
And letting the rest go,
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you very much for sharing. I don't think as many people are always open about that. And that's something too I've noticed with a lot of, I can speak personally too. Like this journey, that I've been on has been very tough. Like we talked about the desert period earlier. Like I know the desert because I've been in the desert. And I think a lot of people, at least in my profession, want to have their shit together. They want to appear to the outside world of like, I've got it figured out. Come to me with the answers. Buy my course, $9.99, whatever it is. They've got like that thing, and I definitely lived that way for a long time. God led me through a place of isolation and loneliness in the last decade that has instilled in me some really, really incredible things. And if you are, whoever's out there listening, going through one of those periods where I think there was a question, and I'm going to jump ahead,
Sure.
where you had said something about like, what do you do when everything that you've tried isn't working? Like, hey, you keep beating your head against the wall and you're not getting the results. I have lived that. I've been there. When you hit that, I think you have to like realize what is being developed for a moment. Like pause and sit, because I tend to take the approach of like, well, just, you got to push through it. You know, you got to go hard. And there is merit to that. That's awesome. But like, if I'm not careful, I miss the lesson and I begin to get prideful about the results. And I think there's a tremendous amount of pride, if we're being honest, that people carry about, well, like, look at what I did with what I had, or, you know, all of these kind of things. When the reality is that, you know, when we come from a place of humbleness, when we come from a place of like, look, I'm here to serve, not to be served. I'm not doing this so I can feel this awesome sense of validation or dopamine hit from the likes and the follows and all that stuff. But it's like, no, this is my message. This is what God told me to share with you. That rings true. Like, I think when you go through that desert period, at least when I've been through that desert period, I learned one, a faith in God and a faith in myself. I learned two, a strength of resilience and continuing to move forward. I learned three, and this is kind of where I've been, like I started to kind of go up. I had to learn a lesson in humility. Like I got very, very prideful about like, well, you know, look at me, look at who I've worked with and what I've done and all this stuff and, you know, my rates and all that thing. And now I'm kind of hit this point where I think, knock on wood, I'm reaching a place of peace in the desert, kind of that thing that I'm, you know, encouraging everybody to go through. And again, that comes from being, in my mind, faith in God, faith in yourself, on point in mission, and humble in its execution. Like, just enjoy the work, like enjoy the podcast, enjoy the thing, let go of, in a weird way, outcome, which is insane for a peak performance coach to talk about, because that's what everybody pays me for, right? They want the outcome, but it's the weirdest thing. When you let go, it seems to come.
Isn't that funny? I mean, that's just energy, really. You know, I think of like that push-pull, you know, like in a relationship where you can sense when somebody's really into you and they're kind of this needy pull energy.
Gives you the ick, right?
Yes. And you're like, I'm good. Yeah. You know, and then you push them away and then they leave you alone. And then it's like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why isn't he calling me? You know, like.
You just, that's it. That energy, that's it. And it's the same thing with I believe, like, success. When you can let go of like this podcast or my business, whatever, it doesn't make or break me. I'm not saying it's not important to you. I'm saying that I matter regardless. Like, I enjoy what I do regardless. This is the work of my hands with the time that I'm here. I'm helping people. Like, when I get down to those simple things, man, it gets really, really clear.
Yeah.
And even, again, with my athletes, we'll still set goals. I'm not saying we're not setting goals to Pro Bowl, All Pro, you know, Super Bowl, all those kind of things. And we get them. But it's funny. It comes from, again, an alignment with your passion, like, and a consistency in your hard work. Like, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to enjoy, and I'm letting go of, do I land the girl or not? You know, do I get married? Do I get the kid? I was just talking, that was a funny one too. I was just talking to a guy who said they were trying to have kids for a few years, and, you know, they tried for like 3 years, and then it was when they stopped trying that they had a kid. And I'm like,
you hear it all the time.
I'm like, yeah, that's crazy. Like, yeah.
I was actually interviewing someone for a surrogacy podcast, and she was talking about, you know, she'd adopted a child, was having fertility issues, so she decided to get a surrogate and had twins with the surrogate. And at the same time the surrogate is pregnant, then she gets pregnant.
Oh, wow.
So she's got children of every different, you know, like an adopted child.
Abundance.
Yes. Yeah. You know, but it was that letting go. And of course, now she has 4 children under the age of 5. And he's like, what have I done?
Good luck, man. I've got one. And I'm like, wow, you got your work cut out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is parenthood? This is totally off topic, but what do you think parenthood has taught you about yourself in this journey?
Yeah, that one's pretty easy. I think unconditional love. Like, I think anybody who's a parent, like, I thought, you know, when I had my pets, like, I was like, oh man, like, I know, I love my pet. I love my pets, but like, I would throw my dog in a river to save my son. Like, I was like, whatever it would take. Like, I love my kid. Like, and, you know, as I watch him and how he's developing, like, sure, there are behaviors, even at 2, that I'm like, oh, bro, like, that's, you know, you can't be doing that, or, you know, hitting, biting, you know, things that kids just go through. He's a toddler. But it never moves my needle of like, do I love this kid? Like, will I, you know, and I got emotional, I think, the last time we were in this room too, because I was thinking about like all of my imperfections of getting ready to have a kid, and knowing that like this beautiful, innocent thing that I'm bringing into the world is going to be influenced by like my ugly spots, right? Like it's going to come out. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to ruin him, right? And I mean, there's good parts too, but that was what was like bothering me at the time. And, you know, part of that when I realized is it's almost this reflection of God's love is like, well, yeah, but like you also got to teach him how to love himself the way that, you know, I love you and love yourself that same way.
Sure.
So, you know, I've been kind of working through that. And I you know, it's incredible. And no matter like dirty diaper, muddy, you know, boogers on his face, like whatever form he comes to me, like I just want him to come.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, that to me is just this beautiful metaphor of how I can show up to God. It's like, it doesn't matter like what I'm going through, what sin I've struggled with, drugs, alcohol, porn, whatever your struggle is, like God always welcomes you and says like, dude, I just want you to come. Like, let me get my arms around you.
I had heard that no matter how good of a parent you are, let's say I am a perfect parent and I teach my kids that they are the center of my universe. I've done everything I can for them. Well, Tony Robbins, I went to one of his seminars and was like, well, that's fucking your kid up too. You know, like the kid that has all the trauma and the issues and all the things, you know, that's obviously a traumatic upbringing. He said, but like when a child doesn't have any adversity, when everything is just given and handed and, you know, their life is perfect, then it's setting them up for this false reality or expectation that life is always going to just be perfect. And so then they don't have that resilience or the practice to understand like, oh, the world can be kind of cruel. And I better get, you know, thicker skin.
There was a essay Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote called The Law of Compensation that kind of talks about what you're talking about, where everything, and I mean, this is also reflected in like the Tao Te Ching, right? Everything has a balance, a yin yang. Like, so, you know, super harsh upbringing might mean really independent, you know, resilient kids, but it also might mean a lot of other psychological trauma or issues, you know? And then in your example that you mentioned, well, you know, I gave them this perfect environment, nurtured them all this stuff, but, you know, they're soft as baby skin. Like now I don't know what to do. Like, how do I get them to stick with their tasks? Like that essay explains it great. There is this kind of push-pull for there to be a light. There's a dark, an empty, a full, a beauty, an ugly. Like that exists, which to me, I've resolved by, again, kind of like letting go. Like, and especially with parents, like, there is this process, you're probably there or have been through it, where it's like, okay, like I've got to let them be themselves, let them, and this, so you asked common issues of what I train with athletes. I have some high school clients, and interestingly enough, like my work with the high school clients sometimes is more work with the parents because it's got to be like, hey, they're becoming their own person. And this is tough because for your whole lives, you have been, you know, feeding them, watering them, taking care, changing them, like do every bit of provision that they have. And now you're watching them, you're both going through this transition of like, well, wait, I got to kind of back off and let them do their own thing. So again, it's not to say that you don't have boundaries or rules or things that you expect, but if you put that faith or that trust in God and you're living authentically to your values, then you know, then they got to go on their own journey and learn their own lessons.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a pretty rough childhood. I had a lot of traumatic things happen. And for a long time, I lived in that victim place. And, you know, why did that happen? And if you had those things happen to you, then you would be like me and, you know, would have drug and alcohol problems and all the things.
Right.
And today I wouldn't change any of it. I really wouldn't. I mean, I was alone a lot as a little kid because my mom was single and didn't have a choice. And man, I am one of the most fiercely independent people I know. I mean, I will go travel internationally by myself without any care or concern. You know, I'm just very autonomous and always have been. And that is a gift of my upbringing, like being able to see that these were all gifts and lessons and opportunities for my character. Right. I'm so grateful for them. So even as a parent and knowing that I've done things that have certainly not been great with my children, I'm just building character.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm just building character.
Good for you.
Yeah,
exactly.
You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think the Buddhists have that expression like no mud, no lotus, right?
Right.
So you got to go through the mud so that you can get the good. And I'm sorry those things happen to you, but at the same time, you're right. You probably wouldn't be doing this mission that you're on now if it wouldn't have been for some of the things,
Absolutely.
that you've been through and overcome.
Well, and I just had a guest on a couple of weeks ago who was talking about like a seed, where does it grow? Underneath the ground in the dark, like we have to go through these experiences like the lotus, to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful for every moment, sure. There are some things I may have like not taken on, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
That's a good metaphor with the seed. There's do you know Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000
Yes.
faces? Yeah. He talks, and I'm going to butcher the
The
quote.
hero story, right?
Yeah, the hero's journey.
Yeah.
But he talks about how every hero has to go into the dark where the jewels glow. And I think that's such a fascinating thing. Like we want to, have this great journey, sunshine and rainbows, but it's actually facing your fears, facing
Right.
your dark, moving into your subconscious and sorting some of these associations that have been built there. Well, that's where the jewels glow. That's where you're going to get things that are so rewarding, it blows your mind.
Right. Well, I sit and I think in my own experiences, like how often when things are just going great, am I really like trying to improve? Like it's usually in the depths of hell. And when things are really crappy, that it's like, oh, I need to make some major changes. I need,
Right.
It's like when things are great, you're just bracing and hoping that they just stay this way. Like
Yeah.
nothing changed. Everything's great. And we know that life is not that way.
Right.
It ebbs and flows. And it's, then we get to appreciate when we do have a little bit of calm in the storm, but
Yeah, you hit it. That's they enjoy the journey. I mean, it's cliche, but it's true. Like,
right.
you got to make the most of today. Today is all you have.
Yeah. Well, and I'm trying to, at this point in my life, still continue to ascend and learn and teach without having to have the darkness all, like,
Yeah.
Lindsay, you don't really have to
Yeah.
put yourself through hell,
Yeah.
that maybe we can do this thing. Maybe there's an easier, softer way.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
went
what
the
I'm
other
learning.
way. It's bad over there. No, I'm kidding.
Can you walk us through a connection between mindset and nervous system regulation and how that all works?
Your mindset, which I'll call like your attitude or your ability to process thoughts, typically is regulated in your prefrontal cortex, right? Like your decision-making faculties. Your nervous system oftentimes is related to like your brainstem, your cerebellum, right? This is what's in charge of your autonomic responses, your fight and flight responses. And there are certain times, and maybe this is kind of getting a little bit into the subconscious work, but I think it can be both conscious and subconscious, where when you see an external trigger or stimulus, that it will trigger in you a fight or flight response. And in today's Western society, we don't really do a ton of like running or fighting in the workplace or
Right.
environment. I mean, some do. I'm not saying they don't, but some do. But when you don't have that, then what happens is your body will eat that response, and that's where you get a lot of dis-ease or disease, right? Because your fight flight response is triggered and it doesn't know where to go with that energy. So when you talk about like mindset and autonomic responses, like you got to look at like early developmental behaviors and attachment styles and how these things have kind of influenced our just impulses rooted in survival, right? Rooted in fight or flight. Like, oh, this is what it means to survive, so this is what I do. And I can't remember which therapist it was. I wish I could give him the credit. I was studying him in my master's program, and he was doing really fascinating work, how he would take couples therapy and he would do video footage of couples in therapy talking about things. And then he would play back the footage for them, like frame by frame. So, your editors over there, like you could have them like go through like frame by frame what happened. And you could see where somebody had an observable reaction response in their facial expressions, a micro expression that was autonomic, right? That was just triggered by their nervous system, rooted from some trauma or pre-informed behavioral issue, from early developmental stages. And that would ultimately end up triggering their partner. And so their partner then would have their autonomic response. And then next thing you know, they would be just like shouting and in a fight.
Escalating without them even knowing or realizing.
They were going into flight state, right? And when you're in flight state, just to be clear, your prefrontal cortex shuts down. Like you stop making decisions and you move into reactions. And that's great for survival, not great for navigating the complexities of a relationship or, peak performance when you've got a lot of pressure and things that you have to manage in order to perform very well. So getting that faculty trained again of like, hey, how do we reset to be in a calm state, begin to observe. In this therapist profession, he would have each partner become an expert in the micro tells of his or her partner. So they could like look and be like, oh, I'm seeing that I'm triggering you. Like, let's reset, let's reapproach so we can get back into our prefrontal cortex to make decisions.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I thought it was really cool. And I think when we can do that, when this is what I do with my clients, I do that through I guess CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or mindset training, like, which is, it's even biblical. Take every thought captive and subject it to the obedience of Christ, right? We have to pause for a moment and be like, this was the trigger, this was the impulse, this is what it's making me feel. Doing like a quick scan of like, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling? Was that thought helpful? Was it true? Is it needed? Any of that stuff. And all of this takes place in the period of, 2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Like it's probably less. But again, with training, everything gets a little bit better. So, I'm kind of long-winded here, but I think to answer your question is like how you relate mindset to your nervous system is you get control of your thoughts. And then you make sure that you are regulating your breathing, to relaxing your shoulders, and again, that's that physiological and psychological creation of state, peak performance state.
Gotcha. Well, and it sounds like, being conscious and aware of when you're starting to do these things I wish everybody would take a training in this and think how relationships would be. A lot of people think of hypnosis as like maybe a party trick or a little woo-woo. I want to know, tell me about hypnosis. Tell me how it can help and aid with peak performance.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought this up because there is a big stigma around hypnosis. Most people associate hypnosis with stage hypnosis, which is you're going to go on stage, you're going to be made fun of, cluck like a chicken, dance in your underwear, whatever it is, at a show. Or, you get movies like Get Out where we're going to hypnotize you to work for us or, torture you, whatever it is. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. Like, hypnosis is a do with process. Like, you are always aware and in control. And, I've been licensed by, as a master hypnotist from the only accredited hypnotherapy school in the US. So, I did a lot of training to do, what I do. And the reality is people take these kind of weekend courses and they're like, oh, I'm going to manipulate you or control that. And some people will even sell that messaging. And so I've had people call me and reach out and be like, oh, can you just make me do this thing? And it's like, well, hang on. let's reset here a little bit. Now, I have helped people stop smoking or do other things. But what I'm really doing is overloading your brain. Like you have, and I would love to draw it out for you, but the theory of mind, according to Dr. Kappas, who I studied under, is you have your brain, which is your mind, and every single day you have thousands, if not millions, of message units that are trying to penetrate your mind. And you have your critical faculty, this deciding process of what's real, is this working, is this not, do I trust this? All of these things that are like filtering these message units. Well, the ones that get through, the ones that are maybe emotionally charged or significant, begin to form associations, positive and negative. And the majority of these are done before you're 12, right? Early developmental stages. The kids are in a pretty much hypnotic state. The majority of, 6, 8, they're pretty much just being hypnotized. Those positive or negative responses at the root of your brain trigger your fight or flight responses, right? So if I walk this through an example, let's say that you were raised around dogs ever since you were a little girl. You love dogs, you see dogs, you welcome them. Somebody else, on the other hand, maybe when they were a child, got bit by a dog, right? And now, and today, they have this negative association of dogs are bad, dogs are danger, fight, flight, right? So what happens? They get this autonomic response of palms are sweaty, mouth is dry, they can't breathe, and it could be a little Shih Tzu. It doesn't matter the size of the dog. It's like, oh, dogs are bad because I've got this association. So what I think a lot of therapy does, hypnosis being one of them, EMDR, even psychosocial therapy, just on the couch is gets you, we go back to state, gets you into a very relaxed state where we begin to reassociate the meanings of things and those autonomic responses. Like does it trigger a fight or flight, or in smoking, you've related this to a sense of freedom and independence and identity and relaxation and all of these anchors to smoking that are in there. We gotta start reassociating those to maybe bad things. No, this is dangerous. This is not my best life. I want to breathe free, clean air. I want to do other activities, and so we'll work on that reassociation process. And the way we do that is by flooding your brain, your mind with message units, suggestions. And then we get you to kind of escape into a state of relaxation or hypnosis. And then from there, we can begin, with your permission of your subconscious mind to begin to reassociate and suggest alternatives for better behavior.
Now, is the brain more malleable in this relaxed?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that would make sense to me. But when you're super relaxed and you're just kind of...
Well, hang on. I should be clear here. Relaxation is one way to get to a state of hypnosis. Another way is intense trauma. It's like, I don't say trauma, but just intense message units. So if you think about like this, I was in 2 car accidents in one day, and I wasn't driving either time, right? This was when I was in high school, and it was fine, but one of them, my head went through the windshield, another one, my tooth went through my lip. Yeah, it was a lot. My mom was freaked out. It's not somebody she was being pranked. She's like, who is this? Like, your son's in the hospital. Who is it? No, he's not. He just was in the hospital. But no, it was crazy. Well, what happens? Like, I'm in this very intense situation that strikes a chord. This is significant, right? There's loud noises. There's flashing lights. There's screams. There's broken glass. There's pain. There's a lot of message units that are very, very powerful that are like, you're going to remember this. And it drills into your subconscious mind and begins to make associations. So now, even to this day, like, I can be in a passenger seat and somebody might turn, left into oncoming traffic. And I'm like, oh, are you seeing him? Like, I'll get on a little bit on edge. And I'm a wheel grabber, man. If you're like a little weird, I'm gonna grab your wheel and be like, yo, pay attention.
Do you drive most of the time?
I drive. I like to drive. Yeah. Well, what happened, right? I formed associations, right? That we kind of do that. And there's the majority of the research out there that says that, maybe 20 some odd % of the population can't be hypnotized. And this is where I'm a little bit different. I don't buy it. I think everybody can be hypnotized. I think the majority of people right now are hypnotized and actually need to be woken up from their hypnotic state that we're kind of meandering through life in. Back in the 80s and before, like 50s, 60s, do you remember like clowns? Like, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So there was like,
creepy.
Well,
Like
so yeah, you're jumping ahead. But before that, like, there was like Bozo, right?
Oh, yeah.
There was Ronald McDonald.
Yeah.
There was, I don't know, there was a couple other clowns out there that were children entertainers, right? And then what happens? This movie comes out. Stephen King writes this book called It. And what does everybody do? Everybody goes to the movie theater, a very calm, relaxed state. The lights are dim. You have a lot of message units hitting, a lot of sounds, lights, things like that. And what you begin to associate. Clowns, scary. Clowns used to be associated with children and birthday parties. Now clowns are terrifying.
Right.
Now when I see a clown, they're icky, they're scary, they're creepy, when they used to be a joyful thing. Well, this happens all the time. Marketers use this all the time. You see a Coke ad and you see smiling faces. Coke, smile, Coke, smile, Coke, smile. And you begin to associate, well, I'm happy when I am drinking Coca-Cola. There have been other countries that have used this, and this is a little graphic, but they took POWs of American soldiers and did horrible acts of violence and abuse to them with Coke bottles and Coke products. And the reason they did that is because they wanted to begin to reassociate. Anytime that you see a Coke bottle, you're not going to get happy. You're going to get really, really negative, right? And so what happened? They weren't in a relaxed state at all. It was just an intense state that bypassed the critical mind that said, hey, this is significant for us to remember, right? So when you go to the movies, when you scroll or doom scroll on your phone, you're getting a lot of message units very quickly. Your eyes are typically down. You're getting begin to glaze over. And then you start to get a lot of ideas. And I think if we're all being honest, myself included. I think we've all been a little bit hypnotized by social media. Like we have these gut visceral responses that cause us to be enraged when we see something because, enragement equals engagement, right? We're scrolling through our phone. We see all these negative associations with a political party or with somebody else. And then when we see that, it's like, oh my gosh, like what happens? Boom, fight response comes up. Like I get triggered, right? Well, what happened? Well, you've been hypnotizing yourself constantly, like by scrolling through your phone.
Yeah. That's really interesting that you say that because I fully agree with you. And I was just having a conversation last week with someone around how this is social media is so against our nature in that like 100 years ago even is all. We just had to focus on our immediate group of people, our friends, our family, our neighbors in close proximity. We weren't focused and seeing what's going on across the world and all these horrific, all of these horrific things going on in the world. It's too much for us to, on a daily basis, be processing. And so social media has 100%. Our accessibility to things all over all the time has not been a good thing for us.
Yeah, I mean, there's pluses and minuses for sure. Like for sure, but in terms of education, I just want people to like realize like what's going on. And if you are, because again, I'll start with me. Yeah. I've been that guy. Like, I've been the one that's scrolled and gotten myself to adopt new ideas or new beliefs just from repeated messaging units, right? Like I just want awareness. Like you guys are aware this is happening.
Right.
And then maybe begin to balance that out with, okay, like this is enough for today. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to connect with some people in the real world,
right.
Hang out with my kids, whatever it is, and like reset, kind of reground a little bit before we go back into conversation or something that we got to do.
Well, we started going to a new church, and that was like a big thing. The media technology detox or something, and that they really were encouraging. No, it's not just a cold turkey, but having an awareness that like, wow, how many minutes of a day, and he used some crazy statistic with kids. And
it's like 8 to 12 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like, we all know it's not educational things that, that they're flooding and filling their minds with, it's just, so being mindful and paying attention to like, I really like the idea of setting time, like not timers where it just kicks you off. Like you have a limit and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, well, it is breaking an addiction. I mean, it's a dopamine hit for sure, but back to the kind of the I guess, I kind of went off on a tangent here on social media, but the reality is that yes, hypnosis is achieved multiple ways to reassociate your beliefs and your associations with what is positive and negative and what triggers fight and flight in your brain.
Got it. What do people come in for hypnosis? I mean, it's smoking. We all know that. But what are some other things that hypnosis could help with?
I've used it largely so you mentioned like flow state, things like that. So I'll have, I had a gentleman who was in the Super Bowl and I hypnotized him, about every day leading up to the Super Bowl performance for composure, focus, confidence, right? And we would keep feeding these ideas to achieve that peak performance state. And he told me their team lost. They lost to the Chiefs. Go Chiefs. I'm sorry to my player who, but he played great. He played fantastic. Had a perfect game. Didn't get targeted. I mean, he was playing very, very tight coverage. Like, did absolutely incredible. Felt very, very composed during it. So I'll hypnotize a lot of my athletes for confidence. It could be, you mentioned like fear of public speaking or phobia. I was on a plane one time, flying Southwest, and I was stoked because I got the front seat with the extra leg room.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I was really excited, and there was a man and a woman next to me, and they had an empty seat next to them, and this lady was like kind of loud, and I got my headphones on, but she was just overly enthusiastic. I was like, okay,
we're gonna have to take it down.
You do you. But then as we took off, I realized that she was really, really loud because she was terrified. And like as we start like our ascent and we're in the air, like I'm looking at her and she's like white knuckling squeezing the hell out of her husband's hand. I mean, and she's, having a hard time, like breathing, like she's just terrified. And, I hear that kind of like prompting voice of like, well, hey, you gonna do anything about it? Or are you just gonna sit there? And I'm like, I don't. I'm like,
today.
I'm like, I just want to chill. I just want to read, listen to my music and sleep. Like I was like, okay. And I, looked over to the guy, her husband. I was like, hey, I'm a certified hypnotherapist, master hypnotist. I see, your wife is kind of in distress. Would you like me to hypnotize her to try to help out with her fear here on being on this airplane? And he looked at me like incredulously and was like, she's always done this. She does this every time she flies. And I was like, I didn't ask
that wasn't the question. Yeah.
I was like, do you want help or not?
Yeah.
And he looks at her and she's like, if you could help. So, I sat next to the empty seat next to her, started talking to her, led her through some breathing stuff, then some hypnotic visualization, things like that. And then she starts busting up laughing, like in our session. And boom, like right then, right there, we reassociated phobia with fear of flying to like laughter, like, this joyful moment. And like, the husband was all shocked. He's like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And like, she was super grateful. And like, I went and sat down and they had a great flight the rest of the way. And, when they landed, I heard him. It's like, we had some crazy hypnotist guy, like hypnotized my wife and she was good. And so again, I think there's a wide spectrum. It could be sleep. It could be fear. It could be confidence. I've done healing the inner child work. There's past life regression. There's timeline regression therapy. There's all sorts of things that you can use hypnosis for. And it's like, well, where do you want to kind of specialize in?
Interesting. I never heard that. So past life regression, explain that to me.
So that one was weird for me too. Like,
yeah, because you're Christian.
Yeah, I'm Christian a lot. And there's a big stigma around hypnosis. I would love to tell Christians, I'm like, hey, your meditation and your prayer is kind of like hypnosis a little bit, right? Your positive self-talk, your affirmations, it's kind of like hypnosis. Emile Couillet wrote a book on the power of autosuggestion, and he was the one that coined the phrase, day by day in every way I'm getting better and better. Day by day in every way I'm getting better and better. And you mentioned, Tony Robbins. Mm-hmm. Every day in every way I'm getting better and better. And Norman Vincent Peale. Every day in every way I'm getting better and better. All these guys use this power of autosuggestion to kind of, re-hypnotize themselves to do something better, or to be better, I guess.
Sure.
Where was I going with that?
We were talking about the past life regression.
Past life regression.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So with past life regression, being like kind of a Christ follower, I was like, well, what is this doing? Is this real? Is this not real? And what I've since learned is that your brain creates symbols, and everybody's brain creates symbols, whether it's in dream therapy or in past lives or whatever. So whether it's real and you believe it's real, or it's a symbol that it presents itself from your subconscious mind of something to be dealt with, we can kind of go through these processes and release things inside of you that may be. So some might look at it and be like, well, that's of the devil. I don't know if I want to do that. And to them, I would be like, well, hey, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe we can just pray about it. But if you are open to it, maybe realize that like you are a complex being and your brain doesn't always know how to explain things to you that need to be resolved. So let's say that you have a symbol for love. Like the first thing that comes into your mind when you think of love would be what?
A heart.
A heart, right? Well, that's probably a conditioning that you had and that I had from Valentine's Day cards and all these other things. Somebody else, it might be the picture of a loved one in their face, and so when you can lead somebody on a journey to visit their past life or to go through different things, the brain can present to them whether it was real or not. Like I'll let you be the judge of that because I've had some pretty crazy experiences with that. There are things that speak to your truth today of what you're going through, and that's what I'm really trying to get to. Is like, hey, if we got to go this route to get to healing, then we're going to go that route.
Yeah. So is hypnosis something that a person can do on themselves or for themselves, or is it best done with a practitioner?
Loaded question. I think it can potentially start with the right practitioner, be very, very effective. But absolutely, I would encourage people to explore hypnosis on their own. I think if I, as a practitioner, get to see you for, let's say, an hour to maybe 3-hour session, once every couple of weeks or whatever, you can be hypnotizing yourself every day. And I think it's really, really powerful when you begin to tie your breath work to your visualization, to the suggestions that you start to feed. And if you study this just a little bit, it can do wonders for you. again, I recommend that book, The Power of Autosuggestion by Emile Coué, like, this French psychologist who talks about kind of autosuggestion, which is conscious level hypnosis. So you will get sold by a lot of coaches or hypnotherapists. It's like, no, you got to come to me. I'm the guy. And again, I think that goes back to what we were talking about previously of kind of our ego and our own need to feel I'm in need or worthy. But while I am absolutely great at helping people, I think you should explore these things and practice and get better at them of making it your own.
Yeah, and I think that that's really good for people to hear because, I'm a Reiki master and I am an energy healer, and I like to teach people what I'm doing with them so that they can do it for themselves, so that at some point not that they need me or that they ever needed me. I'm kind of like the facilitator in their healing, but that they move on or they outgrow me or like that's the key. I don't want someone to be a lifetime client. I want them to go and learn to do it for themselves. There'll always be more people, there'll always be more clients. There's a wealth of a lot of that. So what are 2 or 3 daily habits or tools that you use personally?
For peak performance or just to kind of
just
mental
in
health?
General, mental health, just to be the best, Caleb.
Yeah, I think, so your standard, this is a very boring answer, but it's true. Like is you got to get good sleep. You got to eat well and you got to exercise, right? Like that's what's good for your body. Like that's like, and I say that because I've studied myself and I have gone through waves of, I guess, depression. Like, I don't know what else you would call it, where I'll get really, really low or I'll get high or whatever. And when I'm looking at those things, I think one thing that I've learned to kind of teach myself or check is like, hey, what time did you go to bed the night before? Like, because maybe I'm feeling a certain way and I'm feeling really, really low, but it's like, yeah, but dude, you ate horrible and you didn't get any sleep. And so it's like, okay, it settles me down a little bit. It's like, okay, let's chill. We can just kind of chalk this one up as a, rough day. We'll get through it, but then tomorrow's going to be better, right? So I think your diet, sleep, and exercise really, really big. Now, you guys didn't come here to, everybody knows that, right? So what's better? I think what has been better for me is honestly the spiritual practice of connecting daily with God. I think getting grounded in some form of, I call it wisdom reading, whether that's reading my Bible. And if you're not religious, and that's fine, like, but something that you can kind of root before you begin to immediately hop on your phone, right? Like go to this source to get grounded and kind of level set. And maybe that includes a walking meditation or a prayer. I like do not sleep on a walk outside. Like to just like, it is so good for me. Like if you talk about things that I do that make me feel just across the board better, walking outside, like, praying while I'm walking or reading something good, that really, really helps. I've also found that this seems to be a theme of today, but like giving myself grace in my journey by being like aware of my thoughts, like that thought awareness for me. Like I have a very, very harsh internal critic that like I have to begin to check sometime in my life. I'm like, he's barking up again and this isn't good. So I think awareness of my thoughts and like what thoughts are poison to me in my mindset would be another tip that I would encourage people to do. Like there are thoughts that it's okay to tell them like, you're not allowed. Like this is just, you're not allowed in my mind. Like, just like there's certain things you wouldn't eat for your body, there are certain thoughts that you're not allowed to digest for your mind, right? Take every thought captive. So I'd say that's like probably another tip. Stanford professor B.J. Fogg studies habit building. And, he said one of the most impactful habits that he's ever studied, has more downstream impacts than any other habit, is before you get out of bed to say, today is going to be a good day. And like when, before your feet hit the floor. And my grandma used to say like, hey, before you get out of bed, you say, this is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. So I have this, Stanford professor and the wisdom of my grandpa just both telling me like, hey, before you start your day, start with intention. And I would even say at night too, like bookend your days. Like your 2 most programmable times of your subconscious mind are in those moments when you're waking up and when you're going to sleep. And a lot of people will feed negative things as they're going to bed. Oh, I got to get this done, or I've got so much going on, or whatever. That's a great time to be focused in on gratitude and everything that, how much love you have in your life. I do that with my son. I tell him how he's loved by his mom, by his dad, like how, there's a light in him. Like I'm trying to instill that now in his subconscious mind so that he knows, like, every time he's going to bed, like, he's good. And then when we wake up in the morning, today's going to be a great day. I'm excited about tomorrow, and today's going to be awesome. So bookending your days, those are a couple things that will help your subconscious mind to stabilize kind of your energy levels. And
I'm going to steal that, just so you know. I actually think that's great. I have been really good historically in my thank yous, my pleases and thank yous at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. But I really like the intentionality of saying, and maybe even saying it out loud, like, today's going to be a great day.
Yeah.
And that's, thank you, God, for another great night's sleep.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't a great night's sleep.
Well, the thing about, I can remember, and I think people kind of know this, like, if you go to bed and let's say that you've got a lot of work to do and you're up kind of late, or you're stressed out and you're like, oh, what do you tell yourself? Tomorrow's going to suck. Right. You tell yourself, like, tomorrow's going to suck. Like, and what happens? It sucks.
Yeah.
But, like, I cannot tell you how many times where, like, yeah, I've had to work late or whatever. And I'll tell myself, like, hey, I'm going to sleep well. I'm going to get incredible rest tonight. Thank you, God, for the rest I'm going to get. And tomorrow I'm going to wake up refreshed and energized. I don't know how. And there will be times where I'll only have gotten 3 to 5 hours of sleep, but I will wake up energized. Like you're feeding your subconscious mind this belief, this thought of energy.
Well, and it is true. Words cast spells, Bruce Lee was absolutely correct in that. And yet I find I struggle still to this day, as conscious as I am about what I say and how my behavior, all of that. I still will catch myself like using negative, like, I don't want to do that, or whatever it is.
I'm glad you brought that up, because so again, I'm not perfect. Like I'm working through this. I realized, so you talk about tips, tricks. One of my favorites, he wasn't a life coach, he was just a coach. Are you familiar with John Wooden?
Yeah, the basketball?
Yep, UCLA basketball coach, won 10 national titles, 7 in a row. He is voted ESPN's greatest coach of all time. I've read most everything that he's ever written, and he has just a straight simplicity in his wisdom. And there were like 3 rules that he had like posted with his team, right? No whining, no excuses, no complaints. And I've realized, like, in my older adult life, I'm a little older than I want to admit, that I whine a lot. I whine all the time, and I complain about things. I'm like, what are you? And I do it just to hear my own voice, just to talk to my wife or have something to say. And, like, I think it's innocent with a lot of people. Like, in an organization, people will bitch about the boss, or they'll complain about the coach or the working conditions or whatever, because, it kind of draws connection, and now we can talk about it. The problem is what you feed grows, and it becomes habitual, and then you start to literally become negative, and it poisons you from the inside out.
Like a cancer.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And of your mind. Like, and that's been happening to me, where it leads me to places of darkness now. It's such an easy pattern to do. Like it's not easy being an optimist.
Right.
Like, I'm not naive. I think people think, oh, the optimists are naive. No, I'm intentionally feeding things I want to grow in my life because I want my energy to go this way. I'm gardening my mind, and I have to pull those weeds out. So again, tips and tricks. John Wooden hit the nail on the head. No whining, no complaints, no excuses. I was watching a Instagram clip about 2 people on a podcast. It was Rainn Wilson, the guy who plays Dwight Schrute, and the guy who played Andrew Bernard. And they were talking about how he had some quote of you never know the best moments of your life when you're in them. Don't you wish you could be aware or made known of that? And I was talking to my wife about this week. I said, babe, I think right now we're potentially in some of the best moments of our life, right? We've got this little one at home. We're both relatively healthy. We've reached this place of somewhat economic security. I was like, I think it's really, really good right now. And I've had to check my energy of how much I bitch or complain or whine or get down on things. And I was like, this is something I'm going to be actively working on, is like checking my speech so that I'm not speaking out ill into this world. Like, no whining, no complaints, no excuses. everybody's got to do sucky things. Like that's part of being an adult. Do them and then choose what type of attitude you want to have in doing them. Like, because
they have to be done anyway.
they got to be done. And I want to have a happy life. I want to have a great life.
You know, that makes me, and I'm going to apply this to my life after this conversation, is I'm going to tell my husband to point out, like, hey, do me a favor. When I'm
careful.
Yeah, maybe he's not the one I want. Maybe my daughter.
Yeah.
No, but, you know, I want to know. I want to point it out so that I can correct it, because I think so often it's just an automatic, just a thing for me to do, you know?
It's junk food for the mind.
Yeah.
Like it's very easy to just feast on undisciplined complaints.
Well, aren't we biologically more hardwired to have a proclivity towards negativity for safety?
Well,
I thought I'd read something.
yes, like close, but not quite. Like we have more positive emotions and experiences in our day, but we have a negativity bias, meaning that we feel them deeper. We're more alarmed with the negative, right? But we actually experience like hope and optimism and curiosity, more positive emotions. We just don't register them. We're not mindful of them. You talked about like being in the good times of life earlier today. And, you know, it's like kind of like, oh, holding on. Like the best way you can do that is presence, like being present with the people you love, being present and appreciative of the little details of your life that make things joy. Like joy doesn't, to me, just happen. Like it's something you have to be intentional to create and to give away. That means training yourself to think and act and speak differently.
Yeah, I like that. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm so glad that you came back.
Yeah, me too.
Do you have any last things you'd like to share that we didn't touch on?
Yeah, I tell everybody this, and it's not my words, I wish it was, but you were not born with a spirit of fear. You were born with a spirit of power, love, and sound mind. That's wisdom and discipline. Power is being consistent in what you think, what you say, and what you do with the things that you can control. So if you are feeling powerless, if you're feeling lost or hurting, or you're hitting your head against the wall and you can't make any progress, just no power, then I want you to look at where you're robbing yourself or giving away your power. Are you being consistent in what you think about yourself, think about others? Are you being consistent in what you speak to yourself and to others? And are you being consistent in what you do? And when you do those things under the guise of love with the direction of wisdom, that's transformation.
That is a perfect place to end. Well, I appreciate your time. And as always, seeing you is wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And congrats on everything.
If you like this episode, please like and subscribe to keep up with all of our healing content. And until next time, be kind to yourself, listen inward, and follow what lights you up.